On this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling, I'll be joined by Sean Saputo as we talk about the horror show that was Extreme Rules. We'll also talk about Raw, SmackDown, and a big win for AEW on Wednesday nights. That's all to come on this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. Hi there, Sean Meyers, once again coming to you here on the podcast, joined by a returning co-host in one, Sean Saputo. Sean, good to see you again, and I wanted to get you on because I know you had some hot takes, if you will, from last Sunday's horror show at Extreme Rules. Certainly a polarizing topic because there was some good, there was some very, very bad, I think, on the show. And then we also want to transition into this week. It was a big week on Wednesday night for AEW, one of their biggest wins in a long, long time. Also some pretty notable things on Raw and SmackDown, as well as something that occurred on a radio show outside of the world of WWE. So we're going to get to all of that, but let's start with last Sunday and Extreme Rules, the horror show. One, the name was kind of bizarre, and I think it was, they wanted to set the tone that this was going to be outside the box. They've tried to do some stuff like this with the tagline of the greatest wrestling match ever, solely to get people to watch. I think they did the same with this eye versus eye match, with this swamp match. So we knew it was going to be maybe not a traditional, straightforward wrestling show. Before we break down specifically, how did you evaluate Extreme Rules?
The name fit, horror show. I'm going to put it, I'll put it this way. For the most part, the actual wrestling in the show was really not bad at all. We had some, I would say the matches ranged from very good to decent throughout the night. But just finishes and stipulations and things that happened throughout the night, it was so far-fetched, so cheesy, so corny, that it really took away from what were solid matches throughout the night.
It sounds like what you're describing is what we've been saying for a couple of years, which is talent-wise, WWE is terrific with its performers. Creatively, there's some major issues, and it just seems like they would be better served just to have some straightforward matches with let these people do what they do best. You don't have to micromanage or overbook, but we saw a lot of that. The one match that everyone is talking about, and that's not necessarily talking in an exciting or interested way, but talking in a like what are they possibly thinking way, is the eye versus eye match, Rey Mysterio versus Seth Rollins. And there was a lot of talk that this would be, they would sort of have like a computer generated finish with like an eyeball and whatnot. If you've paid attention over the last couple of months, if you look in the top right corner, if it says live, usually that's supposed to mean that it's taking place live and that it's not a pre-recorded, edited type of match. That was up there for this match, so I immediately thought, well, they can't do anything that crazy. And ultimately, I think it was a finish that sort of was a little bit better than something over-the-top hokey, but really, it just left everyone disappointed because why did they have this stipulation? Why couldn't they just have a regular match? And then the people who wanted to see something like a horror movie, gruesome, they were left disappointed. Other people were left saying, well, why was this created to begin with? I just think it failed at all levels.
See, I really, honestly, take that stipulation out of it, the eye for the eye thing where somebody's losing an eyeball, which Rey Mysterio, I don't know if he meant for part of the eyeball to show at the end of the match when he was laying there, or if that was an accident because it didn't even look like an eyeball when it was in his hand when it popped out. The more sick part of the ending was Seth Rollins puking.
Vince loves a good puke.
Yeah, that was more sick than the eye being popped out of Rey's head, but if you take that stipulation away and you have that as a standard pinfall match, that was a very good match.
Right.
They wrestled a solid match. And with pinfalls in that would have made that match even better and more exciting. But we are stuck sitting here watching because we want to know when the eye's going to pop out. And like I've talked to people and I've heard people say, we're in this eye for an eye match. We're getting Hurricane Ranas. We're getting 619s. We're getting arm drags. We're getting standard wrestling. Like, if you're in an eye for an eye match, you want to beat the hell out of somebody that you're going to rip their eye out. Why didn't WWE just have it as brutal as possible with these two beating the living hell out of each other? Rather, we're just getting a standard wrestling match and then, okay, you're going to go grab this tire iron, use it once, and we'll go back to wrestling. And then, all right, we'll have the same finish. That is the reason that Rey Mysterio's eye was hurt in the first place.
Yeah, that was sort of bizarre to me. They didn't really make it any different than what they did the first time. It just seems like this would be better served if it was like a, no pun intended, an I quit match, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a reason for Mysterio to quit, but you don't have to pretend that his eyeball's popping out. You could just say it's doing extreme damage to his eye. It makes sense in that regard, but I think they made the stipulation thinking people are going to tune in because it's so ridiculous and over the top, they will watch it. And that approach to me just long-term isn't great because you're going to usually leave people disappointed when you have such a obscenely off-the-wall stipulation.
The only thing I didn't understand, though, real quick, is Rey Mysterio did the same thing to Seth Rollins earlier in the match.
Rollins has stronger eyes. He's obviously worked them out much more than Mysterio.
It felt like 2 times longer than Seth did to Rey at the end of the match, and Seth was able. And honestly, if you go back and rewatch that, it actually
I probably won't. But go ahead.
No, I know. Trust me. But it actually looked like Seth was putting his eye into the corner.
Yeah, I actually thought I understand that they're doing their best to play up this stipulation, but it's probably slightly dangerous.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
You know, I would be hesitant if I was those guys. Nonetheless, is this the end for Mysterio for a while?
Depends on what happens with him signing. I mean, he's been wrestling the past, month or so without a contract. And I think it just is going to depend on that. And do we see Rey Mysterio come back into a WWE ring? Does he go to AEW? We don't know. But it seems like with Rey Mysterio, he wants to do whatever is possible to have his son Dominic in the WWE to give him the best possible growth within wrestling that he can give him. So
I would be interested in what sort of contract Dominic's been working on, because he's been on quite a bit.
I think it's a non-wrestling contract as of right now,
like a per appearance type of thing.
Yeah, it's like a per appearance, but he can do a little bit of physical activity because he has the background. And they can, work with him and do certain things. But I don't think he's under an actual Stars contract.
Right. And by the way, they noted this, I think, later that night and then even the next night on Raw, that there's a chance that they could save Mysterio's eye.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So, obviously, I think most people, any decently intelligent person realized that he actually wasn't going to lose his eye in real life, but they've already said in storylines that they probably can save it. So I think Dave Meltzer said it depends on if he re-signs or not, whether they save the eye.
What are they going to do? Have Dr. Octopus retie the retina together and pop it back in?
Yeah, the phrase insulting our intelligence comes to mind with a storyline like that. But you could say the same about the swamp fight, although I think most people would say, okay, I'll take a swamp fight Bray Wyatt because we understand that's, going to be a little bit more movie-like. And it was. Some of it I thought was moderately interesting. Overall, it was sort of hard to follow, and it just, what made it the finish of the match? What does it actually mean? We don't really have these answers. What they continue to do with Bray Wyatt at this point is they make his cinematic matches unrealistic because we saw this at WrestleMania with Cena. We see it again. You can't even emulate like a fight. It's kind of just like I'm watching a very fictionalized movie when you're watching a Bray Wyatt cinematic match. We know this is leading to obviously the Fiend versus Strowman at SummerSlam, but was this a step that you thought was in the right direction or in the wrong direction?
I thought it sucked. Here's the thing. Now, you and I, a lot of other people who watch this show week in, week out, they understand the past.
Right.
The thing with WWE that they like to do with Bray Wyatt matches involving the cinematic aspect is they like to delve into the past of the opponent.
Yeah, we saw that with Cena.
The basic viewer, the viewer who may watch every once in a while, the viewer who is just starting to watch, in that match, it takes you back to Braun and the Wyatt family. You may not have known that until you started watching recently and you saw the feud where they say, oh, he was a part of the Wyatt family. So if you don't, though, you have no idea about what's going on early in that when he gets beaten down by himself with the black sheep mask.
Right.
Then, I guarantee you nearly half of the WWE universe didn't even watch the Mixed Match Challenge, so nobody knew who in the hell the girl was. And then they were like, oh, okay, he liked Alexa Bliss.
That's weird because like they hadn't teased that in probably... I mean, I know he was on Alexa Bliss's talk show one time, but for the most part, like that's left in what, like 2018?
Yeah,
that storyline was really like in the absolute back of most people's minds.
Now, interesting that they were able to kind of bring in a Sister Abigail character. That made it the slight interest for me of that whole aspect being a part of it. But the match was a therapy session. It ended up with Braun being chained to the rocking chair that he destroyed in the beginning of the match, that magically poofed back in the frame when he gets tied up by Bray, and then, what was it, 7 to 10 minutes of Bray Wyatt and him talking and Braun just huffing and puffing? Like, what was it?
I think when you look at these cinematic matches, they've had a number of different types now. They've had some that have been highly comedic. They've had some, I remember Ciampa and Gargano. That was basically just an absolute normal wrestling like brawl.
Beating hell out of each other.
Yeah, that really, like, they didn't change many aspects of that. But I think that The Undertaker and AJ is still the best because you get what resembles a fight, not a wrestling match, but a fight. Everything that happens there is fairly realistic. Now, obviously, you have, like, guy getting choke slammed off the roof. But, like, for the most part, it would emulate what you'd see somewhat in a wrestling match. It wasn't over the top. You have to believe that it's, like, somewhat realistic. And to me, the Wyatt stuff has been so unrealistic that it's like, we understand wrestling's not real, but you can't go to that extreme type of deal.
Yeah. The Cena one was great. And that was just because of the overall way that he portrayed John Cena over his career with WWE.
But I think they went sort of a similar path here. Now, you could say like that was more interesting because it had more to work with Cena than they have with Strowman. But it was the same type of like so out there type of...
I mean, really, it was just Cena getting the mandible claw and then he was disappeared. But I think that one was very good in the context of it took a lot of that. And if you really read the backstory of it, it explains a lot. But this one... don't get me wrong. The set they set up for this entire match was fantastic. The view of the match was fantastic.
Was it too dark for you?
No, I thought it was perfectly fine. But there were cool elements. The boat with when Bray got choke slammed and it went away, and then the boat came back and Bray wasn't in it. Like, that was a cool element. The element of being dragged into the water and then the water just turning blood red and Ian coming up, that was a pretty decent element to the match. But when they're on the pier and Bray's beating Braun with the broken oar, let us see him beating the shit out of him with the broken oar.
Right.
That's what we're here to watch. We're here to watch a match. We're here to watch a fight.
Right.
Let us see that. Like, we didn't see that. The majority of that match was Braun Strowman fighting 3 random-ass dudes that came out of the woods.
I didn't get that. Like, that's an Eric Rowan spot. Why not bring Eric Rowan to do something like that? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't understand why they was guys that were, like, loosely covered faces and stuff.
Just 3 random dudes that just came out and fought most of the match for Bray. That's what it was.
Yeah, I didn't really, and yeah, they did that with the Undertaker and AJ too. Like they had, in addition to Anderson and Gallows, but like in this content, context, I should say.
Gallows and Anderson made sense in the Undertaker Styles match. They were aligned with Styles. Them being in that match and trying to getting a few druids to try to turn on the Undertaker or get him to think that the druids are turning on him makes sense because he's used them in the past.
Right.
3 random dudes just hopping out because ye who enter here abandon all hope. Why are these 3 random dudes showing up at the swamp?
Well, we'll probably never hear of it again. It's right up there with maybe the Ninjas with Akira Tozawa. So.
Oh, God, the Ninjas.
Well, there was no ninjas involved, but Sasha Banks and Asuka had a very highly discussed ending to their match as well. Very good match. Maybe great match. I would say very good. But
I would say between the two, yes.
The ending, of course, is just about as ridiculous as the prior 2 matches that we talked about. So what they basically do is, hey, we don't know how to book this. We want to continue this feud possibly. So they have the referee take a bump, and then Bayley take off his referee shirt, put it on, and count 3. Obviously not official, but now they're doing Sasha claims she's the champion. It's going to lead to a match actually this upcoming Monday, which they really just could have had anyway, even without this bogus finish. And the thing that was like, again, logic completely out the window. I get that they can do this finish and that's how they end the match. But, like, they have to flat out say, like, this clearly doesn't count. Like, there's no way Sasha's the champion. But they didn't really even say that. Like, that should have immediately been addressed instead of, hey, tune in on Monday to find out what the verdict is. I think that they did this solely to try to pop ratings for the following night and then the subsequent week on Raw. And, I don't think that's really going to happen. Again, it's just 2 incredible talents. Let them do their thing on their own.
This ending really kind of personified Bruce Pritchard talking about how tired he's been having to write both shows.
Everyone said it was a WCW ending, and I agree. That's what you think of.
I honestly thought Vince Russo wrote it. I really did. That was awful. But here's my thing in my take on it. Overall, the match was fantastic. Sasha and Bayley and Asuka might be even adding in the men's side, they might be the 3 best things going in WWE right now.
I would probably agree. They're certainly in MVPs, I think most people would refer to them as during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think so, 100%. And now, here was my initial thought on it. I still go back and forth whether or not I actually hated the ending. My thought is, well, that really sucked because this ruined this great match.
A bad ending can ruin a match that is great for 25 to 30 minutes, I think.
Yeah. And that's why the way I thought I've gone back and forth is, well, they gave us this ending that is really that just really ruined this match because of how long it took for all of this to happen, and they really drew this out longer than it needed to. But at the same time, I'm one of the people that want to see something different. And I saw something different. I didn't see the standard screwy finish. I saw something that I sat there and I went, they actually took a little bit of time to think of how to do this in a way to play this. So me, as seeing something different and wanting to see something different, I was sort of okay with it but it didn't mean I liked it. But you still have these people that watch this show that want something different, want a different way of a screwy finish. You get that, but they're still complaining that it wasn't good enough. So I think that's where we're stuck now is it doesn't matter really what WWE is going to give us. It's really just going to be not good enough.
Well, yeah, I think that's very much true. In 2020, fans criticize and critique everything. And I go back to last year's WrestleMania. I don't want to say it's all Vince's idea, but he signed off on Becky Lynch, Seth Rollins, and Kofi Kingston winning the biggest matches at WrestleMania. That's exactly how the fans would have booked it. And yet, people still weren't happy. So, this company can do exactly what the people are calling for, and it still doesn't come across great a lot of the times. Here's my issue with the match. One, I think if you would poll most people, they would say that specific match, Sasha versus Asuka, that could be a historically great women's match. Just let them do their thing.
That was a match of the year candidate.
You go back to Bayley and Sasha in NXT, and they had some, parts of the storyline that were, kind of, like you said, interesting, whatnot. But the matches themselves, they just said, hey, go have your match. We're not going to really touch it because we know we can't really make it better than what you guys are already going to do. In this sense, with those two, that's what I would have done. You know what I mean? I think they're good enough in the ring that just they could have a straight-up match with a finish that is at least fairly legitimate.
Vast difference between Triple H, Vince, and Bruce. Vast difference between the two. Triple H runs the show the way the show needs to be run and needs to be run in the coming future. Vince has a dog and a lackey in Bruce Pritchard that Vince says, I want this, and Bruce says, okay, boss, because Bruce won't tell Vince no ever.
I think the rumor was that they changed the decision maybe that day as far as it was going to be an Asuka victory, and then they did this kind of bizarre finish. But here, if you saw Raw, they have Stephanie McMahon come via satellite, I suppose, which was also sort of weird. And she says something that doesn't really make sense. She's like, Sasha, you didn't really win, but Asuka, you also didn't really win. Well, first off, based on what happened, Asuka's disqualified. She misted the ref in his eyes. That's clearly a disqualification. So when that ref comes back to life, if you will, he says Asuka's disqualified. But even if they go by Stephanie's logic of neither Asuka nor Sasha won, well, then Asuka's still the rightful champion. So they're claiming like, oh, we're going to have a match to decide who the champion is. Well, it's already Asuka. And then they throw in the stipulation Bayley can't interfere. If someone gets counted out or disqualified, they lose the title. It's setting up for another like sort of screwy finish on Monday. And while they've now promoted their upcoming programming to get people to tune in, I just don't think you needed to do all of that and make it unnecessarily convoluted when you have two great in-ring performers.
See, the thing though that I'm completely okay with is the fact that instead of just letting this ride out and have just a bunch of hectic chaos, an authority figure coming in to determine what's going to happen is great in my mind. That's what needed to happen. They needed somebody.
Right. I mean, everyone likes the William Regal role, where like you don't get involved heavily, but when something needs to be decided, he's there to decide. And that happened,
and that was very good. That was a very smart play by WWE to have Stephanie come back and do that. Now, and this is where the way I thought about it and the way I kind of appreciated the ending to a sense of the match at the pay-per-view was, if you look at what's gone on and the way they've dragged this storyline out with Bayley and Sasha, it's been Bayley putting Sasha in bad situations in matches, then, Sasha will lose, but then eventually, but all the time Sasha has been there to help Bayley retain and do what she needs to do. It's almost like they took it as to where Bayley this time was really trying to help Sasha, but really in the long run it's going to affect Sasha because now she's technically not the champion. She won't win the championship next Monday, and if you think she's going to, just go back, watch Raw, and you'll see the nameplates on the title. They still say Asuka.
Right.
And then that's going to just piss Banks off because really this was all Bayley's fault that everything happened. Rather than Bayley just staying away or, maybe helping a little bit and not doing what she did, Sasha maybe won. But now she didn't. So now Bayley really cost her being, because apparently we have to do this for every women's champion.
I don't think we're getting Bayley and Sasha at SummerSlam, though. I think that's going to be pushed down the road to if they do another Evolution, if they maybe think, okay, we can get some fans back at some point, maybe Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, even if, we're looking far in the future, but I think they see this duo works right now. We're not going to change it until it makes perfect sense to split them up. I think the plan was SummerSlam. I think that plan's probably out the window.
Only thing that's working right now for them. Sasha and Bayley are the only thing, and it's not.
And that's why you have to change what the original plan was, I think.
Yeah, they are just. It is legitimately right now one of the only things I sit there when I watch this and go, you know what? I'm actually excited to see what's going to happen with these two this week. Because every week it's a great match. Every week, great promo. They are the two best women in the business, and Asuka is just right below them.
Well, Asuka's going to be seemingly flying solo because on Monday, Kairi Sane had a match in which she defeated Bayley, which that certainly opened some eyes. But based on Twitter and the reaction of the other people in WWE saying, like, what a pleasure to work with Kairi Sane, thank you so much, seems like she's done. And the rumor was that her contract would be up. She'd be going back to Japan. She would stay on good terms and maybe have an ambassador role with WWE, but would not be in the U.S. wrestling actively. So if that was her last match, seems like a pretty high note to go out on. Also seems like somewhat of an unusual note because you rarely leave with a victory. She defeated the SmackDown Women's Champion cleanly. Yep. So, do you really believe that she's done? Are we going to see her hang around a little bit longer? And how does her potential absence affect what's going forward with this feud? Because they're going to have to do something to explain why all of a sudden Asuka's running mate is no longer there.
I do, because it's been talk for a while now that Asuka's supposed to be going back home to be with her husband.
Kairi, you mean?
Or Kairi, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I actually do think she is done right now. It's just going to be dependent on possibly whether or not her husband can come back over here and they can get a deal done where he can be here or whatever it may be. But
well, I was thinking like just the logistics of traveling right now is probably not that easy, right? I don't know how easy it is to get into Japan.
Yeah, so I don't know those logistics, but there's ways you can kind of write off Kairi Sane. You could do it in a way where maybe later in the night, when they were leaving or something, Asuka wasn't around Kairi and Sasha and Bayley jumped Kairi.
That's a very like wrestling way to kind of do it, right?
Yeah, something like that, or I think that would be the smart thing to do. Just have like Banks and Bayley all pissed off, and as they're walking out of the performance center, Asuka had already left, or Asuka was elsewhere, and Banks and Bayley beat up Kairi in the parking lot or something. Something like that to kind of tell a story of her being injured, and they can just say due to the severity of the injury, we are unsure when or if Kairi Sane could ever return.
I think what they did at Extreme Rules is they probably pulled two matches that were originally slated for the pay-per-view to put on Raw and SmackDown respectively, trying to boost the ratings and say, hey, we're going to take pay-per-view matches, but we're going to put them on TV. So last night we got the Barroom Brawl, which we'll maybe get into later. But on Monday they have this unsanctioned match, which I don't know why that had to be the case, between Big Show and Randy Orton. You seem to be so excited to talk about the Big Show. I'll be honest, I thought the match was about as good as what they could have hoped, but when you book the Big Show and Randy Orton and try to make it a big deal, I don't think people are that into it, even though everyone's incredibly amazed and impressed by Randy Orton's work. It drew a terrible rating. Meltzer said it was maybe like the worst segment for like a main event in Raw history, something like that. That it just proves that people weren't interested in watching that, no matter how much those guys went out there and tried to have a good match. It just wasn't going to work.
Randy Orton, best male wrestler in the company right now. Why in the hell is Big Show main eventing Monday Night Raw in 2020?
Because it's an easy opponent for him to defeat, probably.
But no one gives a shit. Give us something with Randy Orton that means something. No, I'm not, and I don't want him to go after the title whatsoever. I really don't. I don't want Randy Orton to take the title.
I think you're not going to be happy that. I think that has to be their SummerSlam feud.
It's going to happen. I'm not happy about it, but it makes sense at the same time. I want to see Randy Orton continue to dominate more people, continue to do more of the legend killer vibe that he's been doing. But there's no credible heels on Monday Night Raw to go up against Drew McIntyre, so they have no choice but to put Randy Orton as the champ in a championship match, have him win the championship, because now we can go to Drew maybe fighting for it for a little bit, and then turn it another way where a couple others have a little spot match, and then when fans get back, Drew can win it like Royal Rumble and finally get that big pop that he deserved, and then Edge can go on and fight Randy Orton, whatever it may be. But my God.
You just put more thought into the next, 8 months than Vince McMahon probably has, by the way.
I know. God forbid, Vince, just give me the pen and paper. Come on. It's not that hard. So, now, nobody cared about this match to begin with. Nobody cares that the Big Show is on Monday Night Raw, because nobody cares about the Big Show, because nobody knows if he's a heel or a face.
Well, you have to see if he's smiling when he comes out to the ring or not. That usually is the indicator.
WrestleMania, he was fighting Drew McIntyre as a heel, and then he shows up 3 months later. He's trying to defend his buddies Edge and Christian. What are you? Nobody knows who you are
anymore. And the
Big
Show does the best that he can with it, but it's...
And you know what? It hurts me because the Big Show is a legend in the company.
He's really underrated historically, I think.
He is. He is a historically underrated man in the company, and he has had a very, very strong career. But at this juncture, it just, and not to mention too the stipulation of being unsanctioned. How in the hell does WWE sanction two guys trying to rip somebody's eye out? But the next night we're not gonna sanction this match between these two guys.
They used like a chair. That was basically right. I mean, it wasn't anything like crazy. I get the Christian one. The Christian one I can understand because, hey, we can't clear Christian. Legitimately. Yes. That made sense. This one did not.
Pop somebody's freaking eye out, and we're going to sanction that match and be like, oh, well, we'll pay for the damages. We're liable for this one. But we're not liable for Randy Orton's going to punt Big Show in the head. What? Just fight. Just have a, last man standing or no disqualification match. Something.
Well, what we got was Randy Orton defeating the Big Show, probably moving on to Drew McIntyre. We still have another McIntyre-Ziggler match upcoming. That'll probably be in a week or two. But on to Wednesday nights, AEW wins big. They got over $1 million for, I think, a very small portion of their main event. It goes back and forth because just 3 weeks ago, NXT won the ratings, and now AEW's pretty much dominating. I don't really know how it fluctuates so much, but it seems like a big win for them. And for me, the biggest takeaway for NXT wasn't what happened on Wednesday. It was what happened, I believe, yesterday between I think it was Thursday. Adam Cole goes on the Pat McAfee show. Not a Pat McAfee fan, by the way, if you didn't know this. And they do sort of like a fake confrontation. But it seemed like it accomplished a purpose because people were talking about it and saying, well, is this legit? No, it wasn't legit. But the fact that people were asking that question, now more people know who Adam Cole is. And that's good for NXT and WWE.
That whole thing was excellent. If you think that's real, well, you don't understand wrestling. Now, a lot of people have said, though, what makes it seem real is the fact that would WWE really sign off on Adam Cole going on to a show and just dropping 15 F-bombs? No. WWE probably wouldn't sign off on it. But here's where they can sign off on Adam Cole doing this is, you're going on a national radio show, so it's going to kind of look bad, but a good bit of the audience of Pat McAfee is wrestling fans. So,
and McAfee works for WWE, not necessarily in a traditional full-time role, but he is an employee.
Now, the way I drew the comparison of, what, this definitely is a work is, I don't see the issue of Adam Cole telling Pat McAfee to F off and calling his show shit. That's fine with me. I thought it was great the way Adam Cole snapped at the,
right. He played it really well.
But if WWE didn't sign off on that, I'm sure WWE didn't sign off in 2006 when John Cena went on the Howard Stern show as the WWE champion. It was talking about banging big girls and slamming, fangirls in this hotel room after shows. I'm sure they didn't want their WWE champion talking like that on a national radio show.
But you also kind of assume if you're going on that show, that stuff's, that's the expectation sort of going in.
I still don't think Vince is going to want his champion talking like that when little kids are his favorite. So Adam Cole was everything he needed to be in that. Adam Cole is not only a great wrestler, but he is great on the microphone. And all it took was Pat McAfee saying, if it wasn't for the Undisputed Era, you never would have had this, you never would have had that.
Right, and that's where, that was very much like a storyline type of insult.
Yes, and then he calls him small. And then Adam Cole just, see ya, flipped it on. And that was the best work shoot that WWE has done since The Miz on Talking Smack with Daniel Bryan.
What does this lead to, though?
It leads to talking about Adam Cole being lost without the championship. That Adam Cole now, without the championship, is even more dangerous than he was with the championship.
Do you think we see him in NXT still? Because he really, we saw Roddy Strong, but I don't think we've seen Cole since he lost the title, right?
Haven't. So that can play into the him being lost thing. But, see, I am very torn on what they need to do with the Undisputed Era. Part of me thinks they need a main roster push. Part of me would love to see Adam Cole or Drew McIntyre face somebody other than Randy Orton at SummerSlam, and we have everything come full circle where Adam Cole debuted at Brooklyn 3 and attacked Drew McIntyre with Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish after his match.
Right.
And we had come full circle to where they attacked Drew McIntyre after SummerSlam, or what may be of it, and they establish a top star and a top heel star on the Raw brand immediately.
The problem is, I think Vince McMahon, after a few weeks, is going to say, I don't think Cole's what I want in a top star. That's the problem.
You know what? Vince McMahon says that, then, and this is just in general context, if he was to say that when Adam Cole comes up, if he's not a top star, then everybody honestly should just stop watching the show, because everything that Triple H is doing has no meaning to anything in the future.
And that's why I think there's a legitimate chance that some guys don't go up to the main roster and that they stay in NXT.
That's why I'm torn, because I don't want to see Adam Cole go up and that risk of Vince McMahon just pushing him to Titus's catering booth with Ricochet.
Well, Ricochet seems like a comparable guy, right?
Huh?
World-renowned Ricochet, people thought he was going to be maybe... I said, okay, if you make Rey Mysterio a main roster star, why can't you with Ricochet?
Ricochet is one of the best wrestlers in the company.
And for a while, it looked like he was going big places, and now he's spent about 6 months doing nothing, floundering.
Yeah, he finally came back on Monday night. So, it scares me for Adam Cole in that aspect. I know Roddy Strong ain't going to have anything to do on the main roster. And I don't want Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish to go up there because tag team wrestling's dead on Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown. Because Vince can care less about tag team wrestling. Which I even tweeted the other day. I said this, I hope some viewers take this to heart when they watch this. Back a few years ago, they had that women's evolution. Right. Give women's wrestling the chance. I am one that personally thinks there needs to be a tag team revolution because
Agreed.
You have way too many damn good tag teams in this company that are either sitting in the back doing nothing, have had to walk away because they had nothing to do, or they got broken up without even a cup of tea in the tag team division, and it's a fright for any tag team from NXT to come up because you don't know whether or not they're going to stick around together or if they're just going to be stuck in the back. I think there needs to be a tag team revolution. I think the fans need to really, if you're watching AEW and people always talk about, if only WWE had the tag team division that AEW has, your voice was heard with the women's revolution. Make it heard with the tag teams. Because if you look at this division, who do they have on SmackDown other than the New Day?
Yeah, I saw there was a tweet about this. There's really no one because the New Days, at least for the time being, they're broken up. It looks like Big E might do a singles thing. The Usos are injured, or one of them is injured, and they just won't use the other one. Miz and Morrison are like sort of a tag team, sort of two guys that sort of do single stuff.
Somebody off?
There's right now Cesaro and Nakamura are not even going to have like challengers, honestly.
So that's the thing. There's nobody there on Raw. I think the Street Profits, as of right now, I'm not counting the New Day because everybody knows the New Day is the best. I think the Street Profits are exceptional.
And Garza and Andrade seem to be pretty impressive. Now the Viking Raiders are the ones that are suffering now. They're trending down.
But the thing is, Andrade and Garza have no credibility anymore. You can't take them seriously as challengers to the titles because on Monday you had them get the shit beat out of them by the Street Profits in the back, and then you had them lose clean in the ring.
Right.
What credibility do they have as a tag team?
Yeah, they'll probably end up fighting each other for a while. That'll break up, and Zelina will be in the middle.
Names out of the hat from Titus Catering going, all right, Ricochet, Cedric, Mustafa. Let's figure out a triangle with these three.
I'm just glad to see Mustafa Ali back on TV, to be honest. I think he's incredible. So we will see what happens with him. Final thoughts. What did you maybe like? Because we talked about a lot of negatives. What did you like this past week, or what are you really looking forward to in maybe the week or weeks to come?
Again, and I'm going to say this, I really did like a good bit of the actual wrestling at the pay-per-view.
I would say McIntyre and Ziggler epitomizes that. Like, storyline-wise, people weren't super into it, but I thought it was a fun match.
I did too. And, it is a little hard to take it seriously that Dolph Ziggler was, really beating down Drew McIntyre. But at the same time, too, you have he didn't know the stipulation, so on and so forth. So I thought that match, for what it was worth, was solid. I thought Seth and Ray was actually a very good wrestling match. I thought Asuka and Sasha was exceptional. I thought Buddy Murphy and Kevin Owens in the pre-show was a very strong match. I thought the tag team match wasn't terrible. Bayley and Nikki Cross actually wrestled a pretty good match. So the wrestling wasn't bad. And I enjoyed watching solid wrestling, but it's just WWE does too many things to make things worse that don't need to be made worse. And that's what happened. So I didn't like a lot of the screwy finishes. I didn't enjoy, that was the main thing I didn't enjoy. And then, having Big Show and Randy Orton main eventing and, throughout this week, I'm looking forward to the future storyline with Bayley, Sasha, and Asuka. I want to see where this goes. I'm not interested so much in the match because I know he's not going to win, but I'm more interested in just hearing what stipulation Drew McIntyre picks and then going from there.
I think it's Ziggler's going to be gone, honestly.
You think?
I do. I think Ziggler's going to be gone.
Well, it's not like he hasn't left before.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I'm not saying he won't be back by Mania, but I think he's going to be gone for months, probably.
And that's fine because after this they have nothing for him.
Right, exactly.
Because his poor teammate Bobby Roode, that they just randomly broke up a tag team and have no idea where the trails of that tag team breakup was. So there's some stuff I'm looking forward to. I want to see proper build to SummerSlam. And now
they better get it going soon.
And that's the thing. We're 3 weeks or 4 weeks away? Something like that?
Yeah.
Let's get the ball rolling here. Right now, we're worried about next Monday night. And that's all they're focused on is next Monday night. Because Vince and Bruce have to, keep writing the show at 3 o'clock and hold back TV tapings. So if they don't have anything, because they filmed 2 weeks, so next week's is already done. There better be some good stuff for the last 2 weeks going into SummerSlam. Because if not, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to get another 2-night event for a big pay-per-view? Or are we just going to have 1 3-hour, half-decent SummerSlam?
Half-decent would probably be an improvement over some of the stuff that they've done, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out again. We didn't have WrestleMania. People's hope was SummerSlam would be the big return. That's not going to be the case. They've already confirmed it won't be in Boston, so it'll probably be another status quo show. But I do think the one thing they can do is let the talent use its talent to the best of their capabilities. If that happens, then I think we'll see a major uptick. But right now, there's no belief that on the main roster with Vince McMahon calling the shots, that will happen anytime soon. I want to appreciate and thank the talent shown by Sean Saputo joining us here. Again, if you want to follow him, you could do so and check him out on Twitter. It is Sean Saputo28. I'm Sean Meyers. You can follow us 5-Star Pod Wrestle on Twitter, 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling on Instagram. For now, we'll catch you again next week. It'll be on another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.